Okay, well, good morning. I'm telling you about what's going on now in Syria. And I wish the news were better. It's not bad considering upheavals we've been through, but it's not good either. And I'm going to give you this from the perspective of various people, not all of whom I agree with. A secular Syrian, an Alawite, a Kurdish guy, a guy from the HTS, and a Shiite. So it's a longish report. Stick with it as long as you can. Here we go. And I'm going to tell you everything I've been told. So the secular Syrian, a lot of Syrians are secular, right? A lot of Syrians are not particularly religious. Some are, some aren't, the way it is. So the secular guy. The Alawites are victims of opportunist jihadists who kidnap them and hold a gun to their heads and say, sell your house for 10% of its value. The international jihadists feel unneeded and are behaving badly. This is what the secular guy is telling me anyway. Ahmed Jarrah, the leader, has declared himself president and has announced a temporary parliament and a national dialogue body to designate the new Syria. There are no actors heading in to upset the apple cart like Iran. The Saudis are rebranding Jarrah as a good Muslim rather than an extremist. They had him walking around the Kaaba and that kind of thing on his visit to Saudi Arabia. But almost 1 million soldiers, hospital workers, teachers, and others in public service jobs have been sacked and sent home. The current government does not want Alawites in the public sector. Obviously, I guess you could say. Meanwhile, the US this is his opinion, all right? The US is telling Turkey to cut ties with Russia. And then another interesting little point from him. The Daesh prisoners could easily be integrated into the new Syrian army. ISIS are from the same line as the hardline extremists with HTS and could be integrated easier than you think. So a lot of Daesh fighters still, as well as countless Daesh women up in the Kurdish area in prison camps. The ISIS, Islamic State. Daesh is the Arabic expression meaning Islamic State. Okay, the bad guys. The temporary constitutional document starts with a statement that the religion of Syria is Islam. Well, that's a fact. Now, kidnapping. Kidnapping is now endemic in Syria. So he says. I have every reason to believe him because I certainly know of friends who've been kidnapped. A relative of his has been kidnapped. Al-Shara isn't that powerful, even though the factions have agreed to come under the umbrella of the National Army. They have a mind of their own. They need to feed the people. They kidnap someone. Okay, so let me rephrase that. Even though the factions have agreed to come under the umbrella of the National Army, they have a mind of their own. They need to feed their people. They kidnap someone. There is an area of Damascus called Hay al-Warud, which is largely Alawite. The people are rounded up. They tortured about 70 of them and then asked them to pick up their things and go. In quite a few cases, people went into someone's house and said, this is ours now. They are interested in taking booty. Right? The victorious people are interested in taking booty. Like in any war, civil war. Once they start, and there is no red line from people in authority, they get encouraged to go on. There's a window of opportunity that's unchecked so the dominant can coerce from the vulnerable. It's him saying this. There are also local tensions and revenge. One village is Alawite, one is Sunni. The Sunnis were disadvantaged under the Alawites. They take their revenge. This is happening around Homs and Homa. And there are plenty of Alawite and Shiite villages around Homs and Homa. Some guy told me, oh, there are no Alawites. Come on, of course there are. Meanwhile, Shara wants people who will do as he wants when the national dialogue starts. Now then this guy starts talking about the upcoming meeting, this coming Saturday, of the Syrian opposition, the traditional Syrian opposition, not the Islamists, the Syrian opposition that was backed by the West, and that's invited by Haytham al-Manna, one of their main figures currently, I suppose, to meet in Geneva. Now, these people have nothing to do with the insurgents that have taken over in Syria, who are Islamists. So the traditional opposition that the West has been banging for years are out, So we start talking about them. The meeting of the Syrian opposition invited by Haytham al-Manna is taking a forward position regarding Ahmed Shara, Ahmed Shara, the leader of Syria now. This guy, Haytham al-Manna, he means, went full throttle, saying we can't accept him. It suggests it's not a genuine position from Haytham al-Manna. Right, that's what he's saying. But if you think of the Arab states, the Saudis and he's trying to explain, you think of the Arab states, the Saudis and the Emiratis always do good cop, bad cop stuff. You can see it in the previous era. Well, he may have a point. The Emiratis engaged with Assad, while the Saudis didn't. Well, it's been going on a while. So they've swapped now. The Saudis are rebranding Shara. The Emiratis are skeptical. So Mr. al-Manna, this is I could call him the leader, I don't know, it's exaggerating his position, but one of the prime figures in the traditional Syrian opposition backed by the West. Mr. al-Manna is influenced by the Emiratis. He's saying he's in the Emirati camp. And also the Egyptians who are backing the Emiratis. So, his words now. Mr. al-Manna is part of the Cairo platform. All right? This faction. And that's how to view the gathering on the 15th, this coming Saturday. Everyone that is going will endorse the al-Manna position, which is a skeptical position about the new Syrian government. Part of their strategy is to make themselves players in the Conference on National Dialogue that's about to happen, when the key personalities are asked to come to Syria. Because the conference is not only Ahmed al-Shara's call, the leader's call. It's according to him, according to this secular guy. They expect, this is Haytham al-Manna and co. from the traditional opposition, expect to be included in the invitation and force their way in. The invitation to the national dialogue on the future of Syria. The entire transitional period is seen as an opportunity by the Emiratis to get rid of Shara. Well, maybe. Whether it is orchestrated from within or without, there is an attempt to counterbalance his ability to govern. He needs to relinquish some power, otherwise there will be no money flowing in. Well, this is this guy's opinion. He needs some support, so he will trade some positions in the mini parliament. The outside forces, the Americans and the Saudis, are trying to put pressure on him. There are names being imposed by the regional states, and he doesn't like that. There are more rough seas ahead. The key point is that he cannot be the sole dictator because his economy is in tatters. This is the opinion of this secular Syrian. I don't necessarily share it. And more about that in a second. Now, I'm going to give you the opinion of a guy from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. So this is a guy that is not a militiaman, but he's come in on the shirt tails of HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the group that is running Syria today. That is the government of Syria today. Little side point here. This is the first thing you mentioned. The new government set up a Borders and Ports Administration. So the Ministry of Transport only handles transport by land now. And Berat al-Bayrak, the son-in-law of Erdogan, is advising the new cabinet. He's a businessman in Syria. Erdogan, president's son-in-law, is advising the new cabinet. Ahmed Shara has called for the UN peacekeeping force to return to the Golan. Well, that's a symbolic call. And it should, for goodness sake. I didn't know it had gone. I knew the Israelis had invaded part of Syria. I didn't know. Anyway, perhaps it hasn't, but Ahmed Shara has called for it to go back and be mainstream there. Everyone who takes over senior posts in the new government is from Idlib. They're not necessarily all originally from Idlib, but some of them might be from Damascus, but they're part of the group that went to Idlib from Damascus, and others up there. A lot of people were driven into Idlib from the Islamist opposition by Bashar al-Assad's forces, and then they've come back from there. And so everyone who takes over senior posts in the new government is from Idlib. And then the important point from HTS here, and it's one you should remember. The new democracy in Syria will not be a European-style democracy. And then he says, it comes in with a strange remark, the country is dying. It's been dying for 10 years. The good thing about Assad was that they had administration. And then he went on to mention what we've just been talking about. The foreign opposition, Haitham al-Manna, will have a meeting in Geneva. Well, okay, we know that. Then he said, the Alawites, we don't want to hear from them. We don't want to hear from them. The Idlib people may not be educated, but we give duty to loyal people only. They are taking over. Okay. Oh, a little aside here about the French. We concluded an agreement, one that that Syria had in place earlier, but was subject to review, with a French company for the port at Tartus, for the development of the port in Tartus. Okay. Immediately, we had concluded the agreement. Macron invited Chara to Paris. It's the way it is, isn't it? The French have a very clear foreign policy. It's vive la France. Whatever's good for France is good. But the French, they're no messing with French foreign policy. You always know what it is. It's straight down the line. It's pure selfishness. Okay. Now then we had the PYD guy. PYD, the emphasis in Kurdish is PYD. This is the group. I suppose if you anglicise their name, it would be PUK, Patriotic Union of Kurdistan. But in Kurdish, it's PYD. And this is the group. They're just like in Iraq. There's PUK and KDP in Syrian Kurdistan. PUK are often kind of wrongly, really, said to be the same as PKK. They're not. But they have the same ideology, socialist, and the in the Syrian region, the Kurdish region of Syria, then up there, up in Qamishli and so on, in the towns, they're PYD. PYD is the militarized group, and the KDP is stronger in the countryside. So this guy now I'm talking to, I suppose he wouldn't mind me sharing his name, but I won't share his name because I haven't got his permission to do so. Is the son of a PYD leader, one of the senior figures in PYD, and his dad died about a year ago. And I used to know his father very well. I knew him very well. Well, I still do. And I haven't seen him for years. But anyway, he came back to talk to me. Just a couple of points. Turkey is backing the Syrian National Army. Now, the Syrian National Army is the Turkish-backed group that is alongside Ahmad Shara's group, Islamist, and is being brought under the new Syrian army that Ahmad Shara is being formed. Was trying to bring it under, but it's and the Syrian National Army is confusing because it's opposition, not the Syrian armed forces, Bashar al-Assad. But anyway, who've been largely disbanded. The Syrian National Army are the ones fighting the Kurds up in the north by and large, okay? He says Turkey's backing the Syrian National Army. The Kurds are facing a difficult situation. And he says this after consultation with his leadership, and it's obvious because the PYD always say this, but we are not looking for separation. We want to be part of Syria. Okay? Now, this is a statement from the PYD in that context. And then he says, my friend, says the HTS, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham leadership, is asking us two things. One, to hand over the ISIS prisoners, the Daesh prisoners in the prison camps, to them. And two, to drop our weapons. Those are big calls. Then he says, if Turkey were to stay away from Syria, it would be better. A 4-year transitional government could push Syria further backward. So that's what he had to say. I'm going to give you a voice from a Shiite friend of mine. And a lot of Shiites have been displaced. So he's a dear friend of mine who knows Syria well and who goes in and out. He's actually Lebanese. His family's from the Bekaa Valley, but he's Shiite and he's closely connected in Shiite with Shiite Syria. There's a lot of these families are intimately connected. Right. He mentions the. He talks to me about other things. He has been talking to me a lot about the persecution of the Shiites. But what he says here now, the Kurds are reluctant to join the new Syrian army, but there is no army. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is not in full control. The U.S. military presence remains. He's talking up in northeast Syria, where the U.S. have a base. There were 2,000 soldiers there, but Biden added 3,000 more before he left office. So that's best part of more than 5,000 soldiers, American U.S. soldiers up there. Al Jazeera, this is a little side point, an interesting one. Al Jazeera revealed the name of the informant, who was nicknamed Caesar. Caesar is the nickname of an officer who disclosed some 60,000 photos of victims of the al-Assad Syrian government. And there were multiple photos of every victim, so it doesn't necessarily mean there were 60,000 recorded victims, because he took lots of photos of every victim. The authorities asked him to take the photos. His name was Farid al-Mudhan, and he's from Dera. It's interesting because the U.S. administration used his photographs as a basis for the Caesar Act, which placed sanctions on Syria, American sanctions on Syria, and on Syrian banking. Syrians did better with sanctions than the Lebanese are doing with banking sanctions from the U.S. today. U.S. sanctions Lebanon because it's, it doesn't call it sanctions, but it's effectively the same thing. It sanctions the Lebanese banks because they have account holders who are part of Hezbollah. But the Syrians were sanctioned similarly, but they managed to kind of continue their own banking system by themselves. Anyway, a big issue is whether all these sanctions are going to be lifted, which they will be, I guess, on the new government. Now, this was my Shiite friend was talking about this, and then he was cut off, and I'm now going to tell you what a senior Alawite, very senior guy in the Alawite community, has told me, and he's a close friend. He's been speaking to the Russians. I don't feel the Russians are confident, to my great surprise. He does not feel the Russians are confident, to his great surprise. Well, that's interesting to me. The Qataris have just given Yolani, that's Ahmed Shara's war name, Jelani, it's very confusing. These guys have multiple names. The Qataris have just given Yolani $500 million. $500 million, okay, dollars. This is an Alawite view, top Alawite man. It's interesting to watch Trump. He never gives a straight answer when he's asked about the Kurds in Syria. He doesn't, When he's asked about what the U.S. forces will do, he dodges the question, Trump does. I think he has a soft spot for the Kurds, like a lot of Americans. Then he mentions there's a delegation of about 35 senior Alawites who are going to see Boulos to promote a Alawite state. Okay. Now, Boulos is Trump's daughter married a Lebanese guy. Boulos is the Lebanese guy's father. So this is Trump's daughter's father. Key businessman because his son married Trump's daughter. And so it's very important because the U.S. administration runs now along family lines. The Alawites, 35 senior Alawites, are going to see Boulos to promote an Alawite state. Well, he doesn't think much of this idea, by the way. He's a senior Alawite, but he thinks, the Alawite state's not going to work. Because the Alawites tend to fight amongst themselves anyway, unless they have strong leadership. But he says the Alawites need some form of protection, like the Kurds have protection from the U.S. in Syria. Then he states the obvious. The Israelis are the winners. They took 400 square kilometers. They're building 2 mini bases with roads and tunnels. It's like Christmas for them. They woke up in the morning, saw the tree, and took the presents. And he mentions Yolani has symbolically banned citizens of Israel and Iran from entering the country, which he has. He's banned citizens from Israel Yeah, they're there, but she's banned them from entering the country. Yolani Ahmed Shara. Okay, same guy. He mentioned something that's been mentioned by a couple of the others, and I just will mention it. It's an aside, but there has been fighting across the Lebanon border. A lot of these villages straddle the Lebanon border, half in, half out of Syria. The Lebanon border, Jebel Shams, whatever. And they're hotspots for drug smuggling and smuggling of all kinds, drugs, alcohol, whatever. Smuggling is done across the Lebanon border. It got out of hand in the Al-Qaa Valley, Al-Qaa, Qaa, Al-Qaa Valley in eastern Lebanon. There's a lot of little bits of fighting between drug runners and so on. The Lebanese army are now sent into the Al-Qaa Valley, 2 brigades from President Arn, because HTS has been firing rockets at Al-Qaa Valley. Only 10 people have been injured, but nearly 50 shells, 50 shells were fired. So this is a little side incident, but it's not, it maybe been blown out of proportion as a big deal. It's not necessarily a great big deal, but it's been going on between Syria and Lebanon. Meanwhile, there have been protests in various cities in the western part of Homs, where the Alawites live, in Latakia, in Jabli, because the Alawites are calling for HTS to release some of the prisoners arrested at the time of the takeover. Interestingly, in their chants, they call on MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, to intervene on their behalf. The Alawites are calling on Mohammed bin Salman to intervene on their behalf, which is unusual. There was also a big protest in Tartus, the port city on the coast, by the Alawites. And then he mentions another thing. A couple of days ago, Israeli forces remained for several hours at Khan Aneba. Forgive my pronunciation. This is a town where the road connects Quneitra to Damascus. It's technically in Quneitra Governorate. And it's only sort of 16 kilometers from Damascus. The Israeli architects, the local people saying Israeli architects, they mean guys with theodolites, were taking readings of the topography and so on around during this time. Well, the assumption is by the local people, these guys are about to build a forward base for Israel at Khan Anaba. Israel has taken a massive swathe of Syria, occupied it, invaded. There's no other word for invaded. A massive. Nobody squeals about that. The Alawites are going from insulting Bashar to saying maybe the guy was kidnapped by the Russians. He wasn't. He doesn't think he was. Bashar betrayed Syria. But the Alawites are he's getting sort of, they're saying it wasn't so bad. Then he mentions Haitham al-Mana, and here I agree with him rather than with the secular Syrian. So Haitham al-Mana and the traditional Western Bank. The Haitham al-Mana is really not on the Turkish agenda. The true leader of Syria today is Turkey. Basically, Turkey is running the show. Haitham al-Mana is finished. The old opposition is finished. HTS, there's going to be no democracy. HTS will be a dictatorship. HTS even is he's no longer calling it HTS, he's calling it the Syrian government and so on. He will slowly consolidate his power, Ahmad Shara, and be the new dictator of Syria. Now, there will be a national dialogue, but on Ahmad Shara's terms. There will be a form of democracy, but on Ahmad Shara's terms, just like there was a form of democracy under Bashar al-Assad, on Bashar al-Assad's terms. These other characters are going to be allowed, if they're lucky, they may be allowed to come and posture around like peacocks at the national dialogue, if they're very lucky. And they'll have to behave themselves until they get out of Syria again, and they can mouth off, of course. Ahmed Shara's show. He's the ruler of Syria. He's not going to give any little bits of power to other people. And that's it now. We have a new Syria. We have a new president. And he's the supremo. And there's no room for anybody else at all. This is not a democracy. 4-year transitional period. 4 years to establish the new Syrian dictatorship. And that's okay, as long as there's tolerance, stability, inclusivity, and fairness to all the communities. And I'm going to end with a sad footnote. It's sad to me anyway. I think it's sad. Sad final point. They've been arresting the gays. The gays and the trans community, 3 or 4 have been arrested so far. And imprisoned, throw away the key, imprisonment, for being homosexual or trans. And what is doubly sad is that nobody protests. Even their own families disown them. It's a sad little aside on the new Syria. Not distasteful. These people were tolerated under Assad. They're not now. Don't like that. Don't like that at all. It's symbolic of something bad, unpleasant taste in the mouth. So, there you go. I'm sorry it's been a long report. I'll try and do better in the future and cut it down. Too much stuff, really. But it gives you a picture of what's going on. God bless you and God keep you. And God keep poor Syria. All the best. Bye.